Welcome once again to the Radical Imagination. I'm your host, Jim Vrettos. I'm a sociologist here in New York City at John Jay College. My co-hosts for this show, Peter Bratsis and Michael Pelias. And we have a terrific guest today, a journalist, a public intellectual, who is an editor at The Guardian, at the Occupy Wall Street Journal magazine. His name is Arun Gupta, and it is terrific to have you here.
Great to be with you today.
Great, yes, and terrific to have everybody here and discuss some of your work. How did you get into this?
Journalism, I just started in college, and then in the early 1990s, I got a job as an editor at the Guardian News Weekly, just storied publication, published for about 44 years. It was kind of on its last legs when I joined, and it went under in 1992, just ran out of money.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a wonderful experience, and I've kept on and off with the journalism. At one point took a detour, became a French trained chef, but for the last 15 years or so I've been doing journalism full time. Founded a couple of other different newspapers, including the Occupy Wall Street Journal, and for the last 5 or 6 years I've just been spending a lot of time on the road reporting from around the country, and the last year I covered the Trump movement, the radical right. I was out at the Bundy occupation in Eastern Oregon, the takeover of the wildlife refuge, covering a lot of labor, environmental, immigration issues. Just trying, in a lot of ways, I'm trying to get a better sense of what's happening in this country, and it's reflected through my writing and in work to see really how did we get here to just almost an unbelievable moment where Donald Trump is president, and then trying to understand where are we going now.
And the Tea Party has become very central to some of your concerns, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
why so? And
there's a direct line from the Tea Party to Donald Trump. It can, I think, be understood as simply as a white revanchist movement, and Peter Bratsis in his work, I think, nails it on the head. Just look at the whole kind of linguistic origins of it. The Tea Party, as in the Boston Tea Party, this harkening back to founding fathers, the Constitution. Yeah. We need to take our country back, and this starts just literally weeks into Obama's presidency in 2009, and it was presented as kind of this small government, free market backlash against Obama, which was absurd. It was very much a racist backlash that we need to take our country back, and Donald Trump fed right into it with birtherism. It was his advocacy, his promoting, of course, this complete lie that Obama was born outside the country, but it fed, there was a particular subtext there saying that, that this country is being corrupted. It's being corrupted by these foreign agents, and at the very top is someone like Barack Obama, who is this foreign, he's a Muslim, he was born elsewhere, he has this globalist agenda, it's feeding into this very kind of like base, like xenophobia and group hatred. And so Donald Trump has very definitely used this for, going back 5 years now. And now he's the president, something no one could have ever imagined. Even himself, he didn't ever believe he was going to be president for the longest time.
And you've written earlier roots with William Buckley, right? Barry Goldwater, George Wallace.
Well, yeah. I mean, the project of the right really goes back. I think we can see '64 as the turning point. That's where the Republicans essentially opened the doors. As a kind of the space is closing for the Southern racist Democrats. The Democratic Party, because we have a two-party system, you always have these very uneasy and often contradictory coalitions within each party. And so within the Democratic Party, you had, northern workers, what were called ethnic workers, from Europe, along with the African white ethnics, along with the African Americans, but that were joined in the same party with the Jim Crow Democrats from the South. And so there was essentially this split that occurred, that the Democrats saw their future more in terms of racial minorities and organized labor. And so that in part explains why they were willing to go for the push for the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, Great Society. And so as the space is closing for the racist Democrats, the Republicans throw the doors wide open to them. Goldwater, of course, opposed the Civil Rights Bill, something that people want to conveniently forget. I believe he also opposed Medicare and Medicaid. And so, he kind of sets this line in the sand because he was against the party establishment then, and he went down in flames against Lyndon Johnson in '64. But just 4 years later, the Republicans take back the presidency, and we've seen this cycle, this constant rightward shift. We go from Johnson to Nixon, Carter to Reagan, Clinton to Bush, Obama to Trump, and they keep getting more and more extreme, and the whole spectrum keeps shifting steadily to the right, to the right, to the right.
The Democrats as well.
That's what I'm saying. It's exactly. the whole is going further right, to the point where Barack Obama, in many ways, would have been very comfortable in the Republican Party in the 1980s, and what we'll see is the Democrats are going to try and stampede the base into supporting some sort of right-wing, pro-cop, pro-Wall Street, pro-war candidate like Cory Booker, the senator from New Jersey, under the idea that, it's just like at least it's someone different than Donald Trump in 2020. We're already starting to see this, and Trump's been in office merely days. But of course, what you're doing is you're setting the stage for an even further right-wing turn. So this is a cycle that, we need to get out of.
Exactly, and that's part of what this show has been about, talking about that radical transformation, possibly of a radical imagination, and specifically for this show, what can the progressive left learn from this experience, or if they can?
Well, so I just spent a week in Indiana meeting with workers at 3 different factories. These factories are notable. 2 are owned by the Carrier Corporation. 1 is owned by Rexnord. And all 3 of these factories, the owners, the corporations, were singled out by Donald Trump in 2016 for shifting production and jobs to Mexico. And Trump said, no more, this isn't going to happen. Carrier became a sensation in February of 2016 when they have 2 plants, one in Indianapolis, another in Huntington in northern Indiana. At the plants, one of the executives, they gathered everyone in the shift and told them, we're going to be closing the plant and all the jobs are going to shift down to Mexico. And it's because we need to, we're not realizing the value that we can, blah, blah, blah. Someone took a video of this. This video was uploaded, it went viral, it became, millions of people saw it, and Trump jumped on that and said, no more, this has got to stop, we need to stop offshoring them. And then he went after Rexnord when they were doing the same thing. Carrier makes furnaces, air conditioners, ventilation units for the home. Rexnord makes ball bearings for industrial and agricultural use. And interestingly, they're all shifting to Monterrey, Mexico, which is right in northern Mexico. That's just a coincidence. So then after he's elected, Donald Trump swoops in and makes this dramatic announcement over Thanksgiving weekend, we're going to save these jobs, and then he strikes a deal with Carrier, and he goes there December 1st. Huge press conference, it dominated the news, even the international media, and he said, we've saved all these jobs. It turned out to be somewhat smoke and mirrors. But right, they saved, so all 3 plants are unionized. the Indianapolis plants are United Steel Workers. The Huntington plant is International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and so he did save 730 union jobs. Meanwhile, though, over 1,600 workers are still getting fired, and that's where I come in. I wanted to go talk to the workers at these 3 different plants, a few of whom who are keeping their jobs, but the vast majority of whom who I talked to are still losing their jobs. And it was pretty fascinating what I found. So these are union members. Half of them supported Donald Trump during the election. And every single one of them who supported Donald Trump still supports Donald Trump.
Even though they're...
And
those are losing the job.
And every single one of them who supported Donald Trump
right.
is losing their jobs.
Right. Still supporting?
And they still
That's
support
amazing,
him. Well, I mean,
why?
but
No
so I talked to Don Zering. He's the Steelworkers Unit president at Rexnord, and I asked each one, who'd you vote for? And he's like, well, I voted for the candidate who didn't win. But he said, Donald Trump wasn't even president, and he saved those jobs. How come Obama didn't do that? And I mean, and this guy, he's going to follow the union line. If they tell him to vote for a purple pig, he's going to vote for a purple pig. But even he recognized, it's just like Trump came in and saved these jobs. And these workers are saying, another worker at the Rexnord plant said, did he save all the jobs? No. Did he save some of the jobs? Yeah. Did he do more than the last president? Yeah. So and they're like, let's give him a chance. Let's see what he can do. The number one issue that kept coming up time and again was NAFTA. Mm-hmm. They kept saying NAFTA, and they could explain it. I think there's all this patronizing that goes on from liberals. These are just stupid racist workers. They have a really sharp sense of their own material self-interest, and they would rattle off the names of factories like they were baseball stars from 50 years ago. These factories that had disappeared from Indiana. Well, there was RCA, there was General Motors, there was Pratt & Whitney, there was Alcoa, there was Ford, there was Powell Speakers. A number of them, this was the second time they're being fired, that a factory is being offshored. I've met workers in the Midwest, that's happened to them 3 times. That they work at a factory, they think, a Navistar factory, they think it's going to be their boom, it gets offshored. Then it's, like a Ford factory, boom, then that 10 years later it gets offshored. And this happens to them time and again. And all they hear from the Democrats are, we need free trade, and that, the future is in these globalization. And they know they're getting screwed over by the Democrats. And finally someone comes along and says, I'm going to stop it. And he does. Yeah. At least for a few workers. It's all, it's theater in a lot of ways. And this deal is also, they don't think they're ever going to see any details of the deal. They don't know how long these jobs are going to last. I talked to the Steelworkers president, the local, Chuck Jones. He was the one who said that Trump lied his ass off about how many jobs were saved, and then Trump attacked him, and then Chuck Jones he got all these death threats. He just shrugged it off. He's like, look, I've been in the union for 30 years. People have threatened to shoot me, blow up my house, whatever. This isn't any thing new. But he pointed out, under the terms of the deal, the state of Indiana is going to pay Carrier $7 million. Carrier is investing $16 million for automation. What does automation mean? You're going to reduce the labor force. So this job saving, right? So it's a lot of smoke and mirrors, but they are desperate. And when you go around Indianapolis and Indiana, I don't want it. It's not the third world, right? But you can just see the decay. You can just see how these once vibrant communities are just getting completely run down. The social services are withdrawn. Of course, a lot of this has to do with like the right-wing rule, but nonetheless, there's not much hope there. And so this guy comes out and if you're drowning, you're going to grab a life preserver from whoever throws it to you.
Absolutely. No life preservers
No
coming
life
from
preservers, right?
the
Anyway,
left here, right?
I just want to mention
Go ahead,
two
Michael.
things. You mentioned this may go back to '64. It seems to me that maybe a deeper embedded analysis would really begin with that this new right phenomena, or whatever we're going to call it, called Trumpism, really is denying the 13th Amendment. Their Constitution ends, right?
Right.
There, right?
Right.
So really, in a sense, we're really back in 1861, if you will, or 1860, that we're, really witnessing the emergence of a new civil war. And this kind of conservatism comes out of that. And witness the choice of the cabinet. We basically have people that are either strongly connected to the Klan or, certainly have coffee with members of the Klan, such as Sessions and as an Attorney General, et cetera.
As long as they're not smoking pot.
Exactly, exactly. And the other thing would be, to talk about, when you interview steel workers, how many Afro-Americans or people of color are in these unions? This is another situation, even though we know that certainly in Detroit this was devastated. And we do know, in terms of the Democrats, that Obama's administration had no industrial policy or reindustrial policy. That never was on the agenda at all. And I think a very interesting statistic came out today that 94% of the job creation in Obama is contractual labor or part-time, right? Temporary jobs.
Right.
So what do you think about, this kind of maybe beginning the analysis with, yes, they are going back the Tea Party to the Constitution and to what you see as an upsurge of our contemporary, you're framing it much more in a contemporary vein, but it seems to me to be very deeply embedded in the American psyche, and that's why it's so easily triggered in these elections, and especially at the local and state levels, as we.
Well, I think we can peel away all sorts of layers of history, which is what is fascinating, and I think that's a very important point, because one thing that I keep pointing to is, like, look, every time in American history there is black political or social progress, there is an extreme white backlash.
Right.
So Reconstruction, right? Then the Great Migration, then the Civil Rights era and the Black Liberation Movement. And what do we have now? We have a black president. We have black figures very prominent in media. It's just like people kind of make cracks about, like, now they're going to get rid of Empire. Their TV, African American culture and life has become a lot more prominent, and we have Black Lives Matter. Right. So of course we're going to see this. Or I think another fascinating historical parallel is we are now at a percentage of the foreign-born population as nearly as high as there was in the late 19-teens. Mm-hmm. And that, of course, was when the immigration slammed shut. You had the Palmer raids, the attacks on the left, this closure for almost 50 years.
The Pinkertons with the unions.
Yeah, yes. You just had this extreme right-wing, xenophobic nativist reaction, and now we're back at it again. And I think we could even draw kind of a global parallel. Israel is obsessed with demographics. They never want the Palestinians to get above about 15% of the population. The foreign-born population in the U.S. is about 14%. Mm-hmm. And you can also even go to India, where I think that's about what the Muslim population is, and you have this Hindu chauvinists and pretty much outright fascists, Narendra Modi, who's in power. So we can find these different parallels that I think are pretty fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Arun, before you mentioned the birtherist movement, and obviously on the face of it, it was an insane position to hold that in 1962, whenever it is Obama was born, he was smuggled in, weak years old, with a master plan to eventually become president. And it's completely absurd. Nonetheless, many people believe that, some people still believe that Trump himself, of course, was a significant figure in the movement. Ironically, Trump as president is the focus of a similar kind, it seems to me, of story, which is that he is an agent of Russia.
Russia.
The Russians have set him up, which is
Right.
equally absurd in many
Right.
ways. That if the Russians were
Right.
going to do something like this, I would imagine there would be much better people to get on their side than Donald Trump. What do you think explains that? How can we explain why it is that so many left liberals may believe today that the reason Hillary lost or Trump's real motivation is that he is working on behalf of Putin and the Russians?
Well, I think they don't want to accept the evidence. Just like you've pointed out, I think very very astutely, the reason why that the right believes the birther lie so easily, because it's easier to accept that than to challenge your cherished beliefs that America is corrupt, that the whole project of American history is basically rotten to the core, which in many ways it is. I think they're different narratives, right? The left can, I think, reclaim, a more populist, egalitarian, liberatory narrative, but we can also
and built
ignore.
on genocidal.
Well, that's what I was about to say.
Yeah.
The two original sins, as Teju Cole puts it, are native genocide and African slavery and the Holocaust of the Middle Passage. And so it's easier to believe that it's just one person in this secret plot is undermining America rather than your whole conception and your whole identity. One of the workers I talked to who he really loved Trump, but he actually was also a big Bernie fan. That's one of the things that was interesting. These workers generally liked Bernie Sanders more than Trump. Even of nearly all the Trump supporters, they really liked Bernie Sanders.
So where did Bernie fail in the message?
Well, he didn't fail.
The Democratic Party failed.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's
right.
Where
I mean,
we're going to
but why
go with
he
this,
still-
probably.
Didn't win them over enough in the campaign.
Well, he won Indiana. Bernie won.
Right.
Indiana.
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. I see.
He was.
Okay.
He won a lot of the
Right,
Midwestern.
right,
He
right.
won
Okay.
Michigan.
Right, Michigan.
I think he
Exactly.
won
And
Wisconsin
we have to
too.
remember he was always facing the superdelegate count all the time, which may have influenced a tremendous amount of voters in other states. But when it came to a lot of the worker states, and when what
had them.
Arun is,
Right.
that Bernie really had a lot of clout, and there I think there's projections, and maybe you can
Not in the
comment on
South,
this,
though,
that he
right?
would have,
But first, to
The
get
South
back
was a
to
lost
to-
cause
South has
anyway.
been lost for a long time.
to get back to Peter's
Right.
point. So I think there's something similar going on. Why do liberals believe this? It's just like I hear, for weeks after the election, there was just this like, we can stop Trump in the electoral college, faithless electors, there's all this organizing. Now it's like people don't even remember it 2 months later, but it's just this frenzy and, or like Trump will be impeached or, it's just like we need to expose him as an agent of Russia. It's because they are unable to give up their cherished beliefs. And I think a lot of it has to do with identity, that their identity is completely wrapped up in a particular liberal narrative of I mean, it's a form of identity politics, basically.
And also
Denial.
missed, which you opened with, the material interests of people. Completely missed,
Right.
in this election, understanding the material interests of
Yeah.
people.
Well, and a lot of these liberals who I do know, their material interests, I've gone through like just, since I travel the country, I meet thousands of people, and I'm pretty sure I know a few people who are in the 1%, but I've realized I know lots and lots of people who are in the top 5 or top 10%. And these are people who are from comfortable to very comfortable. And they've done well within the liberal system, within this secular, this kind of technological professional system.
Meritocracy.
Yeah, and some of them are, we won't name them, but friends from college who we know who actually like fled despotic right wing regimes who've done very well in America, who love Hillary Clinton now, and so their identity is wrapped up in it, and it's easier to believe that something from the outside went wrong than that your whole identity is maybe based on a falsehood.
Absolutely. So that gets us perhaps into Black Lives Matter or Occupy as the two more contemporary forces that are trying to rip aside the veils, right? And what happened to them?
Well, I mean,
Or
so you
not
know,
that they're totally dead,
Occupy. I think Occupy really opened up space in an incredible way. It did fall apart. You know, it pretty much disappeared by the following year. But nonetheless, all the movements and that came out of it, and the way that the organizing and political terrain was completely reshaped by Occupy. First at the ideological level. Before Occupy, the discussion was all about economic austerity, right? And then it became inequality. But also, people may not remember, but before Occupy, there had been this just iron fist in terms of protest. And what Occupy did was give us back like militant street protest.
Make it a little fun too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But this was a big thing where people would no longer negotiate with the police, and certainly like Black Lives Matter really started to take this the furthest. You know, where they would engage in occupations, in the takeovers of freeways. We've also seen this with the climate
And
justice.
confrontation with politicians,
Right,
like
right,
Clinton.
right, and and Sanders,
And Sanders, yeah.
also, and you know, and also at the Trump rallies, you know, the climate justice movement has waxed and waned for decades now, but we saw this kind of new era of confrontation that you know really reached its highest point now with the movement against the Dakota Access Pipeline, and you know people standing, you know, taking the violence of violence of the state and battling successfully. So we see,
And it's going to happen with even greater
right, you know,
vengeance.
And ironically, using part of the state, the veterans who show up with
Right.
muscle that
That's a
really
great
help
point.
was
Right.
a really
Yeah.
good ironic movement, which
Yeah.
you know is something that would happen during the Vietnam War too at times.
Yeah.
Where you get the military also.
yeah,
behind
no, that was an amazing, and that actually shows, I think, you know, kind of the models we need going forward is the, you know, the water protectors in terms of the no DAPL as it's called, and the Black Lives Matter and other groups that were actually locking down, and at the checkpoints on Inauguration Day, like they blockaded 6 of the 14 checkpoints, preventing people from getting through. I think there's also elements that are destructive, and that we need there's not so much people that needs to be isolated. I think when you're organizing, you try not to isolate people who are on your side. You try to isolate behaviors. And I think one behavior that definitely needs to be isolated is this Black Bloc tactics. Just this juvenile, macho.
Tell our audience a little more about that.
So it's you know, the Black Bloc people call it, its proponents call it a tactic. That's BS. You actually look at the stuff that people write about the Black Bloc. That's where people dress all in black. They get this basically from these European anarchist movements coming out of the 60s and 70s, and it really starts to take shape in kind of northern Europe, and especially in Germany. The Autonomen, these are squatters who are, especially in Berlin, who are defending these huge squats against police raids. These are people who live together, you know, work together, they have community, and they were able to form these massive self-defense committees, but they're also defending something material. They're defending their own ground against violence against the state. And, you know, of course, Germans with all their military, militarism and Teutonic efficiency, the Autonomen were really quite impressive. I mean, they look like military units. They would battle thousands of riot cops and often successfully beat them off. But these tactics get adopted into the U.S. But this is also a something going back to the Vietnam. What really underlies, and what the Black Bloc does is it's I think the best description, Rebecca Solnit coined it, smashy. They go around breaking windows, busting up cop cars at the inauguration. They set a limousine on fire, throw, you know, light fires in newspaper boxes, throw dumpsters.
Burn the flags.
You know, I mean, it's just like it's just this, you know, a macho getting their rocks off by throwing rocks.
And doesn't that help create jobs as well?
Well, that's true.
That's
That's
right.
true.
A lot of job creation.
You know, and the thing is,
cleanup
it's I mean, there is. I don't want to, condemn it completely, because there is an important use. And this is what's getting back to what Michael was saying with the veterans, the 5,000 veterans who showed up, that we are going to need self-defense.
Yes.
What we don't need is going around smashing stuff up. I went into businesses right where these, not where windows were actually smashed, but, and the workers in there, all African American, they were like wide-eyed.
Yeah,
In fright. I mean, it's just like,
Stupid,
it's just like they don't understand what's going on. I talked to a labor organizer there who's explaining, like, look, it's just like, this is, he was, a little sympathetic to the Black Bloc, because he had been at a Black Bloc event where they were actually confronting neo-Nazis, a neo-Nazi rally in Pennsylvania. But at the same time, this is not that. That's defensive. You're actually confronting something. And this is also, what it tries to do is like adopt these tactics that are completely decontextualized, right?
Yes,
the tactic of Luddites,
Yes.
these are not workers smashing up their own workplaces.
Right,
It's
exactly.
McDonald's workers are not coming out from behind the counter and smashing windows. This is not a general strike, and that's what he pointed out. Like, look, when you have a general strike, in Italy or France or Greece, there's a lot of property destruction, way more
Yes,
than
of
there
course.
is here, and there's plenty of workers who don't like it, and they get really pissed off if their car gets torched or something, but they understand it. They understand the logic. They may not agree with it, but they understand that there's a goal to shut down the economy. There's a strategy that that they're pursuing to affect a change in the government, in policy.
But we don't understand it. We don't have that.
And none of that
context
none
in
of that
this country.
exists with
So
the
it
Black
becomes-
Bloc.
right.
The smashing. If you actually read the manifestos and the pieces that poorly written pieces that many of them put out, the window smashing is the strategy. It is liberatory. We are letting in, this liberatory atmosphere. I mean, it is so just moronic.
Infantile catharsis.
Yeah,
is
that's
probably
that's
a-
But it does
right.
it does beg a question, because today we're in a situation where everyone is thinking about how to resist the current regime.
Right.
How will it be possible to resist Trump and the many policies or changes that Trump and Trumpism wants to bring about? And that's, and the difficult question is, how can one be disruptive in the contemporary context? Because as we all know, I'm sure, simply showing up for a protest, especially when it's on a Sunday, when it's all permitted, it's by and large peaceful, it is not a disruptive moment. I mean, it may be important in other ways, but it doesn't disrupt. So to have some kind of leverage, some kind of coercive capacity to get some capitulation from the other side, you have to be able to disrupt it in some way. Now, maybe for some people, smashing the windows is some kind of a disruption. Certainly it's not effective,
But it is
as we
disruption.
know.
Okay.
But what could be? What do you think are possibilities for how people could actually resist beyond simply how to disrupt,
Or
beyond
or
simply
what
saying
happens
we're
once it's
against Trump?
disrupted?
Or really,
What
I
can
think
be
Peter's
disrupted?
speaking also to levels of disruption, because
Levels
at
of-
some level, at the first level, there is disruption in terms of the narrative, the dominant narrative by protest.
Right.
So what happened this past weekend disrupts at least the daily flow of mainstream, discourse. It is disruptive in that sense.
But still begs the question, what
but
do you
then
do
it goes to the next
beside-
level that
beyond
you're
that?
talking about, well beyond that.
Well, I'm not
Yeah.
sure how
Got it.
disruptive it is.
Yeah. Okay.
When
Well,
I
no,
was
all right.
when I was, a student 20 years ago, and we would read someone like Robert Dahl, who
Right.
says America's a great country,
Right.
and everyone can have power if they simply voice their opinions. If you simply call up your representative and tell them what you want, that will have some efficacy. We used to laugh.
Right.
It was so inane. And now we're at a point where
Michael
the-
Moore puts out the
Michael
number to
Moore,
Congress.
not only Michael
Right,
Moore,
right, and
but the
others.
left strategy is call your representative
Right.
or
I hear you.
sign a
Yeah,
petition.
yeah.
So people have a desire to be disruptive. Seems that we haven't figured out what that can look like. And my question to you is, if you have any ideas, what do you think are some possibilities for disrupting?
Well, we know very well what it looks like. You know, just what Black Lives Matter has been doing, what the water protectors were doing in North Dakota, and I was thinking, like, you know, Hollywood is full of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
You know, we have Selma, you know, we have the suffragette movie, you know, we have like Matawan, you know, they're all these movies, and what are they about? It's about these mass collective movements where people are willing to take the violence of the state, where, you know, and that serves a number of functions, both like symbolically, but also showing the state that there is a cost, that if you enact this violence upon us, that it's actually going to bring more people out. That's what happened in North Dakota, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You know, and so that and that is why the Black Bloc stuff that went on at the inauguration is so destructive. What you're doing is you're alienating people, and you can make your stupid arguments about, like, oh, you know, property destruction isn't violence. This is not like empire and imperialism. That private property is the violence. It's just like these are just dumb rhetorical little games. You know, when people see the footage of all this stuff being smashed up, all these explosions going off, fireworks going off, you know, rocks going all over the place. So, but we know it's boycotts, it's strikes, it's takeovers, it's occupations, it's blockades, but they have to be organized in a mass way. And the problem is we have to get back to real base building, and that means getting back to real organizing. There are all sorts of different types of political forms that we can talk about. You know, there's electoralism, there's the Women's March, that's mobilizing. You're bringing out people who are already on your side. The inauguration stuff, it alternated between protesting and the blockades and the infantile insurrectionism, right? This is a whole current within anarchism, you know, that we're going to create this insurrection by being in the streets, causing chaos. But the one thing that really doesn't happen that much anymore is genuine organizing. Right. And genuine organizing is where you are part of a collective formation, a strategic formation that has a broader ideology and a strategy, and you are systematically identifying a particular space, whether that's a workplace, a geographic space, an institution like an educational institution, a religious institution, whatever, and trying to win over people who aren't already on your side and who in fact may even oppose you, right? And to get them into a formation, either your own formation or some allied formation, where you're then working on the strategy collectively on changing the power structure. And this happens completely outside of electoral politics. Right. You know, elections
can affect it possibly.
Elections can work in conjunction with it. Right. You know, so I'll give you the example of Portland, Oregon. It just elected this dark horse left-wing candidate to city council on, you know, no one thought she was going to win, but it's because the gentrification has been so massive in Portland. There's been this really vibrant tenants' rights movement that has sprung up, but that was organized, and it has to do with like a few really dynamic organizers.
Structured the energy.
Right, and who created this great organization called Portland Tenants United that now has, like, you know, hundreds of volunteers, and that provided then the impetus to sweep the candidate into office, even though there wasn't any formal ties. They were changing the political debate in Portland through their organizing, through their protests, through going after landlords, through winning concessions from landlords. They created that space for someone from seemingly nowhere to come in. So that's
and then
what
it becomes more concrete. It's
right.
not just some sort of existential catharsis or whatever. And I know Michael and Peter are probably waiing for me to say ask this question. No, just in your travels. About have you met or been involved with Reverend William Barber and the Moral Mondays, repairing the breach, the creation or attempt to reestablish the poor people's movement? Is this a moral movement that is necessary as well. Not electoral politics as such, not left, right, but more, what's right and wrong, and fusion politics, particularly in the South, as he's arguing. What do you think of that, or if you're familiar with?
Well,
some
yeah,
of this?
I mean, I saw him. I saw him.
You're
at the,
sighing here.
I saw him at the. No, I'm not sighing.
All right.
I think. Look, I mean, obviously.
That's more of the left.
That's
Well,
what,
yeah,
what do you think? Okay. I had a,
It's
I was
okay.
going to
It's
throw
a
that
very
in.
open. No, it's
And
a good,
next
good
time
question.
we'll do this
It's a
when
good
we have our
question.
scotch.
Yes,
that we were-
of course.
All
Good,
right.
yeah.
And try some of that French food that you learned to make.
Johnny
Okay.
Walker Black.
Okay.
Well,
we
yeah,
got
yeah.
it. All right.
That'll be our
And
communion.
Reverend Barber will
Right,
join
right,
us
right.
on that. Okay.
The Johnny Walker Black is
Right.
the blood of Karl Marx.
There we
you
go.
know, so,
Okay.
So no,
Not
it's
the red. Okay. All right. The black. Okay.
the black's better.
All right.
So I think he serves a very important purpose. We have to recognize that when we're talking about bases, we have to include religious institutions, right?
Okay.
That is still very important to a segment. We should not conflate the black church with the black community. There are plenty of African Americans who are alienated or want nothing to do with the churches there's a lot of different types of conservatism within these churches, but within the Latino population, a lot of these immigrant communities, the churches also play a very important role. So sure, we want that. I'm just skeptical of whether you can do it purely as very skeptical, purely as a moral movement.
I don't think he's doing it just as a pure, but that
Right.
is a foundation.
Right.
That's where he's coming from. And the fusion politics, though, working with white conservatives, as you were saying before, how do we bring other people who actually oppose you into understanding that you are all working together?
Well, I don't think
Or is that-
I don't think it's so much about conservatives. So here's the thing. The left has a lot of bad habits, and not to beat up on the academy, but I think a lot of it.
Go ahead. We love that.
A lot of it
We've
comes.
only got 3 or
Yeah. A lot of it comes out of particular academic narratives. It's just like, look, when we look at where does the left socially reproduce itself, we can go back a century. The left in the U.S. would reproduce itself through the labor movement. It would reproduce itself through immigrant communities, through the media, the arts. The left had an enormous presence, right, on Broadway and Hollywood.
Municipal governments, taking public utilities.
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
there was some
So,
very material.
but now where does the left
Establish a station
reproduce
like
it?
this.
The left has been relegated. I think you're right, to
Yeah.
the academy. This is part of the problem.
And
or
the
leftists
media,
mostly. And
Well,
the
and even
media.
that's being generous.
And even
Because
that's
I can
being
tell you,
generous.
inside the
Very
academy,
few.
Yeah.
really
the
in
leftists
academy.
are not the
Right.
many. It's
Right.
the
Yeah.
Right,
Right.
and they're going to come under extreme assault in the same way that the academy has in Wisconsin. I mean they have their hit lists already. They're going to go to we're going to see, I think, neo-McCarthyism under Trump certainly, but there's a lot of the academy. It encourages debate and conflict and difference, and so you have this problem on the left where your enemy is someone you agree with only 90% of the time. And it's just like when I'm talking to these workers, it's just like they could have wildly differing perspectives. And getting back to a question that you asked and I didn't answer about, yes, there were gender and race differences. But one of the most interesting conversations I had, Paul Krugman, after Trump win. He writes this whole column about the white working classes voting against their own interests. BS, this guy,
The plurals, he doesn't know anything.
he doesn't know. When's
Too
the
many
last time?
Too many bagels on the Upper West Side.
Yeah, well, at Davos
No,
probably,
at Davos. And Davos, yes.
And when's the last time he's actually sat down with working class voters? Only one worker told me they voted against their own interest. That was an African American woman who did not like Trump at all, did not vote for Trump, and she said she liked Bernie. And she's like, but I voted for Hillary, And then she paused and is like, and I knew if she won, I'd be out of a job. She voted again, and she realized she was voting against her own interests in voting for Hillary Clinton. So, you know, the thing is, the left has a lot of bad habits. One of them is, you know, we should be working with people we agree with 50% of the time, maybe even 40 or 30% of the time, at least, you know, part way on things. The left is really bad at listening. It loves to hector, to moralize, to stand on its soapbox. It's obsessed, because it has no actual material power, it's obsessed with linguistic power and purity. So unless you can use the right terminology, you know, I've just been to too many meetings in the last couple of years, and I understand the need for this in certain contexts. But where people will go around and say what are their preferred gender pronouns, and it's just like, most of the time it's just like, come on, this is just stupid political theater, you know, where everybody actually ends up using the gender, like half the people look confused, like, what are you talking about, you know, but everyone ends up using the gender pronoun you think that you would imagine that they would use, right? So it's just like, the left is great at making people feel stupid if they don't know academic jargon. It's great at making them feel guilty if they say something un-PC. And the role of the left should be basically to just shut your mouth and listen, and just listen, and just
advocate.
listen, but just talk, just let people talk to you, and try to find a common point. And there are plenty of people who you're not going to be able to organize or talk to. You just move on to the next person, right? But the point is, find that common ground and build from there, rather than obsessing over the differences, you know. And this is what real organizing is: hard work. It's not going to happen on Facebook. It's not going to happen on Twitter. It's not going to happen by signing petitions. It means getting out of your comfort zone. I get out of my comfort zone by traveling around and talking to people all over the country, but at the same time, getting out of your comfort zone may mean talking to the person next door to you. We live in such, you know, this kind of heterogeneous society now, where you can have, you know, slums that are next to $5 million condos, or you could have someone on public assistance, you know, next to, you know, people earning $250,000 in the same building. It just, get out of your comfort zone and actually start to talk.
Are you seeing that happening here and there? Can you give us some?
I think we're in a moment where people are desperately reaching out. Like, I mean, you know, I've just been hearing from so many people, I want to get involved. What do I do? Like, I've heard people say, like, I want to be organized. But now we're reaping, you know, the sad harvest of the destruction of the left, that there is no left organizational form that can take in the mass, not even thousands.
Not even sites to meet.
You know,
they're scattered, but we don't really even have centers where people can come to.
So, you know,
this is where maybe the churches or a barber comes in.
Well, let me give you an example. So, like, I happened to be in Portland after the election and was following there was multiple meetings every night, tons of protests. There's still all these meetings, all this organizing going on. So
mainly young people?
No, all over the place.
They had the time to do this.
Well,
the effort.
I mean, you know, Jane McAlevey talks about, you know, there are moments where people will drop everything. You know, where normally they're like, oh, I'm too busy. Well, suddenly going to, you know, the school play becomes less important, or you know, doing your hobby, or, you know, you're willing to make the time because they see it as so urgent. But this is a window that's not going to stay open forever, particularly as the Democrats try and shunt all this energy into electoral politics.
But the immiseration might continue, right?
Well, so, of course it will. But if, you know, proletarianization resulted in revolution, 3/4 of the world would be in revolt right now.
Right, not enough.
Not 95%.
Yeah.
You talked about the 5% we know.
Right, exactly. Right. So Portland is the city itself is about 500,000, a little more. There's this group, Surge. I think it's the acronym is Showing Up for Racial Justice. They're allies of Black Lives Matter. After Donald Trump won, they had 1,400 people who wanted to join them. I mean, that is absolutely extraordinary. You know, that third of 1% of the city was just like, we want to join. You know, the protest that was held there, the estimates varied from 60 to 100,000. Now, the entire metropolitan region is about 2 million or so. But nonetheless, that represents 12 to nearly 20% of the population went to the Women's March. Yeah. You know, so of course it's going to be like filled with liberals. You know, but the role of the left, I think, is to form these strategic organizations and to get back to real base building, and to figure out where are the spaces where we can do these base building. It's going to differ from area to area, whether it's in the neighborhoods, whether it's in the educational institutions. I think it's imperative on all of us who have an analysis, who have political experience, to get involved in organizing now. That's the only way that things are going to change.
Electoral politics is
Well, it's failed
irrelevant.
time
It's
and time
failed.
again.
On its own.
Sure.
On its
On
own.
On its
Sure.
own.
But
it's
backed by the
demonstrated.
sort of energy pushing politicians, possible transformative change, at least.
Well, I think we should look to the cities.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
And I think we should also be very bold about the cities. You know, to fight the power of
Okay.
the U.S. government, you need massive institutions.
And the state.
Right.
And
now,
well,
at this point.
well, the reason I don't include the states is we don't have the power
Okay.
to do that yet. Maybe in Vermont, you know,
But the big cities.
right, the big cities.
Okay.
The cities are the economic engines. They disproportionately account for population, GDP, and essentially the conservatives they're like ticks on the cities.
Right.
You know, they're just sucking.
But you're pointing though to a major contradiction in some ways, because the cities have become consumer capitalism par excellence,
Right.
and why there's so much of this,
Right.
gross domestic product,
Right.
but the production is so far away that this manufacturing, what's left of it.
I mean, the
is
suburbs may be better than
yeah,
the cities
yeah,
in terms
yeah,
of
yeah.
consumerism.
So we have
The suburbs probably are more appropriate.
There's a lot of
form
manufacturing that happens
Yeah.
in the cities,
Yeah.
nonetheless. I mean, you know, you could go. We could
Still some,
go over
yeah,
to
yeah.
Brooklyn.
Brooklyn Navy Yard is niche manufacturing.
Well,
which is
there's
new
a lot of
moment.
light
Yeah.
medium. So there's over 200 food manufacturers
manufacturers,
in the
right,
Bushwick
right,
Williamsburg
right,
corridor. So
right.
there's a lot of manufacturing that still has to happen within the cities just because of supply chains.
And
But-
that's where you feel the real action.
well,
can be,
it's
right?
where
Great
look
possibility.
Trumpism, if it's a thing, it can be understood as an attack against cities.
Right.
Which are
Foremost,
diverse.
right? Secularism, pluralism,
right.
diversity, tolerance. You know, cultural expression.
Oh, and
Right.
and the way people live together.
Right.
Because
Right.
the Trump aesthetic, of course, is big mansions, golf
Yeah,
courses.
yeah.
It is against, even though, of course, he made his money, with apartment buildings in the big cities, or some of the money. The aesthetic of Trumpism is counter to that.
Yeah, it's
Louis
not
the
not
Louis
the
the XIV,
lifestyle.
in Versailles,
right,
these kinds
right.
of questions, and it's not irrelevant to note that the movement against the cities, which happens in the 1940s onwards, is very much structured by the realization that the radical movements of the 1930s were fundamentally urban, that having
Yeah.
people
Right,
of
right,
same
that's right.
Yeah.
class and ethnic backgrounds living together densely
right,
in
right.
places like, of course, the Bronx or Brooklyn or parts of Manhattan and so
Right.
forth, or Detroit or Baltimore and these other cities, were a necessary precondition for their capacity for political action.
Right.
So this is, on the other side, they're conscious of this, or have been certainly, and pushing for suburbs and the destruction of the cities, hollowing out of the cities as an answer.
And I think we should. I think we
And
should be
unfortunately,
bold.
we've got to be conscious. We've got a couple minutes, so finish the point and just try and maybe summarize or give us some.
Well, I think
idea
I think so. You
where
know,
you're heading
we
to.
build power in the cities, and there are
Right.
people who complain like, oh, what about the rural areas? This is, you know, that's what one for BS. It's just like rural areas account for 18% of the population, and this idea that you're going to give up all your social networks, your social capital, move to some rural area where you don't know anyone. It's also arrogant, like you're there to save them. That's not going to work. That we build links where there is good organizing going on in rural areas, but I think we need to be thinking very radical, such as secession. We need to put this on
Yes.
the agenda. That you know, why not that the West Coast should secede? Why not New York City should
So
secede?
no Fred Hampton in Appalachia here, huh?
You know,
I hear
why not even Chicago? Chicago is this incredibly
Well, of course,
important
very,
shipping node. It's
Yes, it
unique
is. Yeah,
node
sure,
in
yeah,
terms of
Great Lakes,
the flow
Lakes.
of goods.
Yeah.
You know, all these highways, rails, you know, waterways that
City
come
with
through
broad
there.
shoulders,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
Sandberg
You
called
know,
it.
or why not Miami? Or you
Right.
know, let's put this on the agenda.
And imagine if New York City were capable of making its own laws, passing its own budget, setting its own taxes, how much better it would be. When people want to come here from Ohio or Indiana, they would have to apply for a visa. We could, you know, vet them. Let anybody
Legalize
into
drugs
the
and
cities.
prostitutions. We'll do it safely and properly.
All right.
Think about the
It would
business.
be a much better
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
And then the real democratic form of cooperation is a confederation. And we could have a confederation of autonomous free cities.
Well,
New
we
York,
don't have any more
Detroit,
time, I'm
Chicago.
afraid, and we need to say
We have the master
goodbye.
plan. We got a
At this
plan.
time.
We have to say-
But we
I
have
meant
the
more for-
plan.
we have the
Temporarily
plan.
au
Temporarily,
revoir.
no
Au
time on
revoir.
the show.
Yeah, yeah.
Aaron, thank you so very, very much. It
Thanks
was
for having me.
really terrific.
Good,
Michael,
Jim. Nice to see you. Thank you
Peter,
for
absolutely
hosting
terrific.
today.
This is Jim Vrettos. See you next week on The Radical Imagination. Thank you very much for listening.